Welcome everybody, day 267, some more, no 287, this is where we are. Okay, so we're going to be practicing content today and now, content now. Oh, utilizing my voice to sing and to produce content, yeah, hey.
So what is ClickUp? I'm happy you asked. Let me tell you. So what is ClickUp? If you just give me a second to explain.
Exalt your name.
Awesome. Okay.
Holy Spirit,
Let's keep going and let's read it. The people that are reading
come
this.
flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. Oh, I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of love, and my heart becomes free,
Alright, come on then.
and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit.
Okay, stop. So the story makes sense because you told it so often, it feels familiar. Random poetic thought, right? Because when we say something again and again and again, actually let me make this quickly large here so we can actually see what I'm saying and not what I'm seeing. Hear what I'm saying, not see what I'm seeing, exactly. So the ego is adaptive and it assures societal cohesion by being aware of how other people would perceive our actions. The goal of thinking is to anticipate, evaluate, reason. For example, whether the piece of wood that I have is long enough for whatever project I want to use it for. So it is understandable that we would measure ourselves in the same way. But unlike the piece of wood, you become good enough and long enough through believing so. That is why there is descriptive thought and creative thought. A lot of people, when they don't control the direction of their thoughts, imitate themselves into an inhibited, low energy, tense, stressed and negative state out of habit, because that is what the mind does when you don't train it other ways. Thoughts are pointers. Thoughts are pointing us towards. They can bring us to the awareness of things inside of us that we have not allowed to come to the surface yet, towards desires, towards blocked energies. How to decode where your thoughts are leading you and pointing you towards what we need to take a look at inside of us. Thought patterns that people have. What if? I need this. I always. When I, then. Justification. You just get carried away for months at a time. Thoughts around the desire for the meeting of unmet emotional needs. Thoughts about getting the prerequisite for emotional fulfillment. What is the content of your mind? Descriptive thought about situations or other people. Creative thought. Past memories. Wishful thinking. If I just had then. Advertising jingles or stories that you have heard. Visual situations, like the guy is getting kicked in the head by a flying knee. Dialogue with oneself, answering and responding. Explanation and making excuses for oneself, why it is the way that it is. Evaluations. First I need to do this. Man, how am I going to get over there? Now go fast when crossing a street, for example. Defending myself against imaginary accusations or past instances. Anger fantasies, violent fantasies. Distractions, soccer, gambling, women, food, fixing things around the house, insecurities, sicknesses, children, animals. Explanations. Great piece of content. Descriptive thought versus creative thought. Oftentimes, when we are not aware of our thoughts, we tend to just describe what is around us to ourselves in our own mind and our own voice, because the thoughts that we think, we usually perceive them in our own voice. It feels like we are speaking them, yet there is a difference between thought and thinking. Thinking really is the active mental representation of what you otherwise would verbally say with your mouth and with your vocal cords. That is called thinking. Thought is just things that are happening to you in your mind that you seem to just receive, that don't necessarily seem to be in your own voice. That might be other people's voices in your head too. And then there's the question of, what does that serve? Why is that you receive other people's thoughts, and where does it come from? And so there's descriptive thought and creative thought. Descriptive thought is basically describing the situation to yourself, how you see it. But here's the fundamental principle of that. Every thought is creative, whether you make it descriptive or creative. So creative thought would be, for example, to speak it into existence how you want your life to be. For example, because I'm worthy, people pay attention to me, right? So you make the statement true by using the word because, which is psychologically sound. Because I'm worthy and happy, other people pay attention to me, right? Or especially, I get up every day because I live the life of my dreams, right? And so creative thought is the thought that you want to think in your own head, in your own mind, and descriptive thought is basically just describing what you see all around us. So this is what decoding your behavior is all about. We want to pay attention to not only what is right here, but also what we want to manifest. And so in decoding human behavior, we are finding out what is the real reason and the real cause for the behavior. Because here's what I found, and you can tell me whether that is true or not, whether you can verify that with your own life experience. What I found is the following. Oftentimes, decoding human behavior, as I said. And so for us, we want to find out what is the reason for the behavior, because here's what I found, and you can tell me whether you think that is true or not, whether you have made the same experience in your own life circumstances, in your own experience of life that you have had. I have found that oftentimes an identical behavior can have two very different causes. And so when we want to change a behavior, it is not so important that we find out how to change the behavior, that we actually pay attention to the behavior, but we need to be paying attention to the cause of the behavior. And I'm going to give you an example here, and you can tell me whether that makes sense to you. Young girls who are cutting themselves. Let's say we have two young women who are cutting themselves on their arms, and as horrible as that behavior is, it does happen a lot, right? So it makes sense that we talk about it. Not so that the behavior continues, but so that we can actually find a solution for that. Wouldn't that be okay, right? And so what I found is that the behavior that tends to look the same on the surface can have two very different causes. And now let me offer you two potential causes for you, and then we can see how we can decode that behavior and devise a solution in order to change this behavior and devise a solution that actually can work and actually last. Because oftentimes what I've also found is people go to therapy, people go to coaching, people go to all kinds of seminars and hypnotherapy and other kinds of ways to change the behavior, and they haven't really understood the real cause. And I hope in the way that I can bring to the table, not only do I think that this is very unique, but that's not and has never really been done before, but that's really not for me to say. That's really for my audience to decide, so I'm not going to say that. So I'm not going to say this, but I'm very excited about this approach because I really do think nobody else has truly articulated the things in this way, and I do think that people need this, and this gives a whole new perspective on how to change behaviors that will work. But hey, I'll let you be the judge of it, right? It's not for me to proclaim that. It's like, right, for my audience to say this back to me. But so when we see, as I said, two young girls cutting themselves on their arms, it could be that this is just the tension in the body that is being stored up. And by the way, in this amount of tension that is being stored up, it can be a different behavior that works in the same way as a relief or release pattern towards the same stored tension in the body. And so what we oftentimes see is that we have certain mental beliefs as well as certain habitual patterns of setting up our life circumstances and living in a way habitually that our body doesn't get rid of the tension. And so if we don't find a healthy way to let go of this tension, our body invariably will find an unhealthy way to let go of this tension at some point. In the same way as you can only stay awake for so long until your body will find a way to put you to sleep so that you actually rest. And even if you pass out in the middle of a meeting or while you eat, your body will find a way, because you can only with willpower power through so long until the need needs to be met. And your body also has a need to let go of the tension in your body. And now let's say for one girl that is the problem, that she harbors tension in the body. And now when we would devise a solution for that, we would then start by actually going and finding out what could be ways how she can let go of this tension in her body in a healthy way. And that may be a solution ranging from that can... And so as I said, that might be a solution that can range from ballet dancing as well as swimming or horseback riding into actual martial arts. And I'm a huge fan of martial arts because it also gives you the certain humility that you get when you're in this receiving end of violence, somebody stronger than you, that will prevent that you are actually doing these acts towards somebody else. Okay, but here's my point. As you see, two young girls who are displaying the same kind of behavior, and that can be for two very different causes. For one girl, it can be the release of tension. For a second girl, it can be just to get in touch with the anger, and that can be in the same way as getting in touch with the sadness inside of her, right? And so let's say there is a second young woman who is displaying the very same behavior, but for a very different reason. For her, it can be that through that, she actually, after that behavior, gives herself the full allowance and the full permission to really drop into the state of sadness, and lets her tears flow and let all of it just go, right? And so that is another kind of release. It's not the release of physical tension, it is a release of an emotion. And oftentimes these types of behaviors, they are linked to certain emotional states that we have linked up, and that we only give ourselves the permission to feel after this one behavior. So the behavior and the emotional state afterwards, they are linked in our minds, they go together, and our body has remembered that. And so if the emotion underneath needs to be felt, for example, a deep sadness that is deep down underneath, that is not fully felt, that is not fully experienced, that is not being released, will come to the surface regularly. And then usually not only are we defending ourselves and running away from the deeper sadness, but also on the surface level sadness and disappointment, and shunning those feelings away. And it's like they're energetically stored in our bodies, and they are growing and they are building up. The more you avoid them and you don't really feel them through when they come up, you just resist them and you avoid them, they get stored up until the desire for the body and the need for the body to let go of all of this stored energy becomes so big that it's basically giving you pointers. And these pointers can be thoughts in your head where you feel like you're getting just more and more depressed over time, like gradually, until at some point you're really not very alive anymore. You're not smiling, you're just generally trodden down and heavy and depressed and dark. And that might also be a pointer, right? That those sad thoughts come up. It can also be that you have that, right? Exactly.